A lot of people will put on this stigma, and we need to realize there is a most of the time a backstory why that father is single, and too many individuals make a judgment on the front end without knowing the back end. What is up, everybody? It's Ed Gow Jr. from Dad Central, and it's beautiful blue today. Beautiful blue.
Drew
God.
Solon of Dad Central.
What's going on, Drew?
It's summertime. We have had a heat wave, and it's been good to get outside, but also nice to get into the air conditioning when we need a break.
100%, 100%. Well, let's get into today's conversation. We're going to be talking about this subject. I'm going to lead with a question first. Ever feel like you're carrying the whole weight of fatherhood on your own? Interesting fact, 1 in 5 single parent households are led by dads, and yet most resources still target moms. So today we're going to be talking about single fatherhood, finding community and support. And today's goal is to help single fathers find strength through support and real connection. And we're going to cover 3 topics or 3 areas: the emotional reality of single fatherhood, where community begins, building a support network, and then finally what happens when dads find connection. So, Drew, before we jump in, anything you want to chat about before we get into it?
Uh, no, I think this is an important topic, and obviously, with my lived experience, I have some perspective to share with it. But yeah, I think this is will be hopefully valuable for anyone who's listening, or anyone who's listening who knows a single father out there.
Excellent. Well, let's get into our first area of chat, the emotional reality of single fatherhood. What are some of the challenges or emotional challenges you feel that single fathers are faced against or face?
Yeah, this is a tough one. Tough one because it brings back, that lived experience, which was, in my circumstance, a very high conflict separation, a lot of negative circumstances involving child welfare, child and family services, family courts. Anyway, so to speak broadly, I experienced a lot of isolation. I know in speaking with many other fathers, isolation is pretty significant. They feel alone, like nobody understands them, nobody believes them, nobody, is there for them. You friends that you thought were friends turn on you. It can be very challenging. So I think the isolation, and we know dads already feel isolated, just generally in their fatherhood, but when you go through this aspect of separation, I think the other part of the isolation, which if I turn it more internally, is when let's say a relationship breaks down, or you're in this dynamic of being a single parent. Primarily, if the relationship is broken down, is that there's shame, there could be guilt. There's all the aspects of the dissolution of this relationship and what comes of it, and all those emotions are pretty significant as well. So you can't just put one sort of label to it, but I would say the emotional just upheaval of a relationship breakdown, or having to parent and take on these responsibilities that are all now on your shoulders that maybe you previously were shared. So there's it can go pretty deep, but I would say isolation pretty challenging, and then the emotional weight of a relationship breakdown and new responsibilities.
Okay. Okay. I also want to add too that there can be a stigma in regards to this area too. So a lot of, whether we like it or not, the world has a stigma about single fathers, right? And a lot of people will put on this stigma not knowing the backstory. And we need to realize there is a most of the time a backstory why that father is single, and too many individuals make a judgment on the front end without knowing the back end. Drew, anything you're wanting to add to that piece at all?
Yeah, I'm thinking of the movie, I think it's Blended, where Adam Sandler is sitting down and he's having dinner with Drew Barrymore, her character. And, you see the stigma in this scene where it's like, well, what happened? Like, why is this guy a single dad? He's got 3 daughters. And the reality is his wife died of cancer, and she kind of put her foot in her mouth because she was judging him. And I think that's a very real representation of what it's like with this whole idea of stigma, is that there's always a judgment before the story is actually known. And so, and I think this is the reality of the world we live in. So, and it comes in all shapes and sizes. So it's not, just for single fatherhood. It's in a lot of different areas.
Sure.
But it's the truth, and I think it's the reality we need to actually face. And the more you face it, I think the more that you can actually deal with it. Maybe I'm not sure if this answers your question, but there's another aspect of this idea of, when you are a single parent, it sometimes can be all on your shoulders. So whether you are, you're, the fortunate situation where your partner passed and you are the sole everything, that's a lot of weight, a lot of responsibility, and there could be this idea of decision fatigue, or this idea that I know I'm being judged, so I've got to really have it all together. I got to make sure that I've got answers to everything, and that can really push people to really to the place of like burnout or overload and overwhelm, and that could be quite challenging. So there's a lot going on, and of course, single moms face this all the time. So we're not. The goal here is not to dismiss the challenge of single parenthood, but it is to focus on the needs of single parents and specifically single dads, because there don't seem to be the resources and support or even acknowledgement of the challenge of single fatherhood.
Nice.
What are your thoughts, Ed?
Yeah, I fully agree with all of that. And this having it all together, dads and male caregivers, people expect us to have it all together when we're with a partner. The pressure sometimes gets even higher when you are by yourself. You're doing it on your own. So the pressure is only going to increase and rise. So relieve that sense of having it all together. At the best of times, no one has it all together, right? You may have it all together for a minute, then next thing you go, bang, etc. So we want to leave this point with this message. It's normal to feel overwhelmed, and you're not alone in that. So you're not alone in that. So take that weight off you. You're not the only one. Let's move into our second point here, where community again begins building a support network. And I know, Drew, this is one of the foundations in regards to your passion with fathers, a support network. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when I was going through my circumstance, my thoughts were, if I didn't have friends, if I didn't have family, then for me, if I didn't have a faith, I'm like, no wonder single dads or separated dads or divorced dads like struggle. I mean, I was struggling as it was, even with all of that. So to me, it was like, man, I understand why it's, you see some of the, you know, really awful stories that come out of, the results of how single fathers struggle. So, and as I said, I had community, but I was fortunate. I've told this story a couple times recently. Is that, when the separation happened, which was, I call it a shock and awe campaign. It was kind of like, pre-planned for over 2 years to really pull a rug out from under and yank the kids away from me in a really a horrific way. But I had already had, I knew stuff wasn't right, and so I had been reaching out and had a meeting set up. So separation happened on a Thursday afternoon. I had a pre-call on a Friday with a counselor, and then we set up regular meetings. And I started meeting with him on a Monday, the next Monday, and we met every week for that first year, and then I shifted to every other week for the next full year. And so to me, that was literally one of the things that was most crucial to me. Of course, I had family, I had really good friends. The other story I'll tell is that, separation happened in March. And then by about beginning of August, I made a decision to go for a little bit of a road trip. And I had two good friends in the London, Ontario area, and then I had another friend in the GTA. And it was about 3 or 4 days where I kind of went and I spent time with my friends and their family, people who loved me, people who cared about me, people who knew me, knew who I was, and really just, I'll say loved on me for that time. And I could just reconnect and be myself. And that was to me such a crucial step to take, to re-engage and be with friends because up to that point it was pretty challenging. In fact, it was a we won't go into the details, but it was a really awful, highly anyways, awful summer.
Mhm.
Um, in many ways. And so that connection with friends, people who knew me and understood me, was so rejuvenating to help me keep going through some of the challenges that were obviously ongoing. So, the takeaway is, start with what you have and what you know, and that is trusted. So, and it doesn't have to be big. It could just be one person. I was fortunate to have my parents. They're an immediate lifeline, and they were there right from the beginning. So, start by reconnecting with one friend or one family member that you absolutely trust and can be some support for you through there. Ed, what are your thoughts? And you've obviously supported fathers for a long time.
Yeah.
How else
Yeah,
could dads build
I
community?
can't I can't and just piggybacking what you're saying, whether you're with a partner or not, if you're a dad or a male caregiver, have at least that one person. And it's interesting because when I asked dads, fathers, male caregivers, if there's an emergency that happens at 3 o'clock in the morning, do you have a guy you can call? And a lot of times they don't have anybody. So one of the calls to action I would say is if anyone listening, if you're dad, father, male caregiver, if you know someone like that, ask them if they have that. And if they don't, have them get one on board because it's really so important, especially if you're a single father. Yeah, there's also, you can explore local meetup groups, online support groups, leverage school events, community centers, or shared interest groups. And I just want to end this point with saying support doesn't have to be big. It just has to be consistent. And you were sharing, Drew, that you have that consistent network or that consistent go-to. Whereas when we're broadcasting, and we're in baseball season. Drew played baseball in the past. You have someone in the bullpen. You have your closer in the bullpen that you can go to help you get out of that jam, so to speak. So that is really good. Go ahead, Drew. I think you want to
Yeah,
add
I think
something to
that's a
that.
very relevant point. Any time, I think as parents, it's important. Well, so to me, is this is a crucial, almost more of a life piece, but it's certainly the importance of it escalates in single fatherhood. This lifeline, this trusted friend, this resource is I think just so powerful and important. And I think of the challenges or barriers that fathers face, especially single fathers. Their own hesitation, their own nervousness. How am I going to? We talked about this stigma before. You know that you're already being judged before you even, let's say, open your mouth or as you kind of walk into this place. So just know that there are resources out there where dads can understand your story, can understand your journey, and are there to help support you. And that is one of the things that we've done here at Dad Central. We created our dad mentor community for this very reason because we knew dads need a safe place where they can come and connect and feel heard. And this is a story of a dad we just met with recently who just joined our dad mentor community. And one of the things that was most valuable for him is I finally felt like I wasn't alone. Other people knew what it felt like to go through what I was going through. So it's so powerful and important. Community is and building your support network makes a huge difference.
And let's our third point today is what happens when dads find connection. And Drew, you've been sharing a little bit about that. Maybe you can go a little bit more into it when those dads find connection.
Yeah. I mean, if I just think about that first weekend, uh, it was a highly stressful circumstance in every single way. And after that time with friends, my stress, I guarantee you, was way down. Emotionally, I felt recharged. I had people who I knew cared for me, and they expressed it clearly, and that made all the difference in a circumstance where I was really questioning myself and wondering, like, what am I doing wrong, and why is this going on? And that really was helpful. The connection piece of feeling heard or being like it's okay to actually share is that uh, as I would share with close friends or other people that were trusted, I began to learn a lot more. I began to understand a lot more. I began to connect the dots. I remember one foundational conversation with a friend who'd known us mutually, and this person had done some professional was a professional in sort of a mental health professional, but had done some advanced training, and they asked me 2 or 3 quick questions, and my answers, and they were like, "Yep, this is kind of the clues and signs, and this is what I was suspecting." And that was like unlocking a key piece of understanding the dynamic and what was going on, and gave me so much insight and understanding and helped me just learn. So to me, that those are some tremendous benefits there. Anyway, so I'm sure you've got something to share though too, Ed.
Well, you know that having that community can be transformational. And I feel that either if you're watching or listening to this, you can hear through Drew's voice that it's been a transformation for him. And having that community where you can have a safe and brave space is so important, where you can model healthy relationships, because if you're a single dad and you have healthy relationships, it's also going to reflect with you and your kids are going to see those healthy relationships, and it's a great model for them. And creating that safe and brave space is so important to me. Like, it's one of my foundational phrases when we're speaking with dads. And Drew and I spoke with a father earlier on this week, and I feel we created a safe and brave space for him, and he just expounded. And Drew had spoken to him previously, but with Drew and myself together, he added on some stuff that he had not shared with Drew. So creating that safe community, non-judgmental, is so important, not only for you as a dad, but also for your kids. So those are the three things we're going to chat about today. We talked about the emotional reality of single fatherhood, where community begins, building a support network. And then finally, we talked about what happens when dads find connections. So, some key things I just want to add: you may be a single dad, but you don't have to parent alone. And then I want to challenge anyone who's listening to this: if you're a dad, father, male caregiver, or if you know one, reach out to one other dad this week, even if it's just a text. That's one of the things I do with a lot of dads. I'll just send a text message saying, "You good?" 2 words. 2 words. And that simple check-in can make a whole heap of difference. Drew, anything you want to add before we shut it down?
Um, I think that the journey of single fatherhood, and not that I've experienced it to the extent of maybe those who are listening who are years and years into their single fatherhood journey, but it is definitely challenging, but the most important and valuable work that I think you can do. Obviously, you have to provide for your family as best you can, but the relationship, and the presence of you as a single father in your children's life is so crucial. And I think the final thing I'll say is, remember, your role is not to be mom and dad. You can't replace mom, but you can be a fantastic father to your child in a way that helps their um, builds them in what's going to help them be the most successful in their life, and you are needed for that. So just want to encourage dads that you've got this, we've got your back, and keep going.
Okay, so as we close it down today, a few quick things. First, I want to thank Drew for sharing some of his journey. Also want to thank our listeners and viewers for showing up for this show. And also want to say and reaffirm that support is possible, available, and worth seeking. So, Dad Central, a parenting podcast to reduce stress and build confidence in fatherhood. Again, our show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. So, as always, want to thank you to giving the most important thing, your time, for checking out our show today. And as always, be well and keep the faith. Take care.